to attend our annual district meeting, is what my hopes are. Anyways, I don't really want to ruffle the feathers there at this point in time for any reason, and go from there.
So you're saying in the future that it's not logistical to take
Well,
it down?
it's, again, in an ideal world, it'd be nice to have folks together from a records keeping standpoint, from a here's what you pick up at the post office, here's what you pick up at the town office standpoint. It would just be easier. But in regards to actually scheduling the dates for our meetings and when these actually have to be published, Rod, I think it's kind of a hard thing to target. But yeah, we're going to try to do this every year. So I think it's probably moving forward, it's not going to be something we're going to be looking to do. Unfortunately, I think that there's other things that are probably more important than having the host come together. I'm only speaking for myself. I mean, if the board wants to take a different position, you can certainly consider it, but I think it's just too difficult to accomplish that at this point in time.
It has to strive for the reality.
Yeah, and I know in years past, too, these dates weren't paid. We didn't pay as much attention to these dates in years past either. I know, and we're more on top of things this year, both the town and the school district in terms of these dates. But it was that first year that we passed the bond that it became really evident that we had to do it differently.
Well, just thinking in the past, though, having some history here, that when the book was combined and the meetings were close together, I think there was more attendance,
Probably was, yeah.
a lot more attendance.
Scott?
So you have two separate entities as far as the town's concerned. There's one that's supersede the other. Can you legally do that? Put both together?
Sure, Carl, let's put together. They always have in the past.
Town and school. Never.
Yeah, as far as the publication is concerned, there's no reason they can't be combined. It's, I mean, they're,
So it's a time issue, it's not a fault.
it's a timing thing, it's just, you have to have, you actually, I mean, there are no requirements as to what the publication actually looks like. You just have to have it published. You don't have to have, I mean, you can theoretically do one copy and call it good. If it's combined with something else, there's no rules about that per se. So we'll move on from now. For now, I can talk with the selectmen about scheduling our meetings together for next year, or for 2019 rather, and to see if it's something that's possible. They unfortunately would probably be a little bit more beholden to us, and that because it's easier for them to schedule a time than it is for us because we need the SAU participation, and they have 7 towns to do these meetings in every year, so it's a little harder for us.
So maybe that's the first step, is to at least just go and talk to the town office and see how they feel about it. Is it even possible? Are they willing to be flexible on the calendar?
Yeah.
And just see what their answer is.
And we said the meeting was when?
Our meeting is March 1st.
Yeah.
You have March 1st, which means that we would have to distribute a week prior, which is February 23rd. Your town meeting is March 15th, so in order for both of them to be combined, you'd have to have all the information from the town by February 11th.
So that, yeah, those would have to be 3 weeks away.
Or move
I'm seeing
your meeting.
with my tunnel vision, I guess, that I'm seeing what you're saying, that how things have changed and so on, but, good.
But I think the solution would be what Andy suggested, which is we should talk to the selectmen and see about our meeting dates close in time. And if that doesn't change the attendance of our meetings anyway, typically town meetings pretty well attended as our meetings, it could be much better attended for any districts. I think a good place to start would be to discuss with them if they feel that combining the two close together is going to maybe change that. It'll be a good discussion to have, Sarah, so we'll continue to look it up. Regarding staff salary and benefits, I'm in favor of putting those in our books similar to Bartlett. The only thing I would personally be opposed to is having the benefits listed with the individual employees. I don't mind having on the same page the total amount that we spend on benefits per se, but I don't want them broken down into individual employees. So I don't see how that's pertinent.
What if they put down in a separate area, the cost of, say, a single family without a name, just.
That's when where it becomes, it shouldn't matter whether it's a family or a single individual. That's why I don't like seeing them broken down that way. It's,
You can't hire because of that.
right.
Oh, yes, you can't discriminate.
And
statutory benefits.
Yeah.
That's good.
So are we?
Yeah.
Becky, get through that out first. And as far as vendors is concerned, my personal opinion about that is that, I mean, this is the last one we go. And
For vendors.
and, I mean, we have, sorry, just simply, we have a lot more than the town does, and a lot more, I mean, like 10, 20, 50-fold what the town has. And to me, that would make it very difficult to actually find pertinent information. It's all public information, it's all on the records. You're very welcome to go down to the SAU and review the records and find that information. But I think by publishing that information, we would be doing nothing more than really confusing the issue, making it more difficult for people to understand our budget and how we spend money. If there's particular areas that you're inquisitive about, we'd be happy to walk you through a process for trying to figure out how to look at the information you want to.
In actuality, Jerry, I didn't ask you about the vendors.
Oh, that's, sorry, it's public information, but I think by putting it in a publication form is just going to make it difficult for people to understand what we're spending.
We always make it available online.
No, I don't think so. We don't need a formal motion for the salaries and benefits on the page like Barbara does.
No, that's just the direction you gave.
Chair, can you explain, back to the health insurance, 'cause I think I missed it, why do you not put a price tag on what it costs for a family versus an individual, just so that we can compare it, people can compare to the marketplace of what other businesses are paying for such?
Yeah, those are actually online on the SU9 website. So if you went under staff, it has the rates and all those pieces right on there.
I'm just asking to make it easy for people and accessible, I don't see many people going onto the SAU website and searching for it, but people, it's like the one document they look at from the school every year is probably this document. If they look at nothing else, then they look at that.
I look at it from the standpoint of protecting our employees' rights. And
It-
we're
it's-
not a school that has 80 employees, we're a school that has more.
Yeah, I guess I don't see that. I mean, usually there's a family price and a single price, and listing that out.
I don't, so you're not saying who is what,
Absolutely.
no, you're saying just like, what is our rate?
Just what-
What
what
is our rate
rates?
for
Yeah.
single?
Again, it's public information and it's available, but I think by publishing it on the same page as employee salaries, directly connects that to the employees. And my personal opinion on that is I'd rather protect the rights of my employees, if the town's employees, the school district's employees, and have that information directly on the same page of things. I know it's not much of a difference, but in my mind it is.
I guess I don't even know who has kids and who doesn't, who's single, so it doesn't, I guess if it is public information, then what's
Well,
the?
because to me, it's why are you looking for the information? If you're looking for the
Because it gives
information.
me something to compare to. I know
I
my
understand,
company
I
is.
understand what I'm saying, is that so you're looking for that information for reasons that have nothing to do with who our actual employees are, so why does it belong on the same page that our actual employees are?
Because I want to see how well the school is doing shopping around the health insurance. How well is the town doing at are we shopping the health insurance? Or are we just taking what's coming along?
We can talk about that during budget time.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to ask, would it serve your ends for information if we made that an agenda item one time during the year where we talked about that and let the public know about that, or if it came out in a separate document?
I think that would be a fantastic discussion, because it's a huge part of the budget.
Sorry.
Yes, I was just going to say that usually in the town of Jackson, the municipality part, that November is when you have to have the option, if you're a town employee or a retiree, you have a month, so to speak, to look at the new plans, and they do put them out there. I didn't happen to bring my file with me, but I do have a copy of what it costs for what the town offers And that's what I think might be the difference with the school, what the school offers their employees. Not, we offer a family plan, it is this. We offer a two-person plan, it is this. And usually there's two different plans that the persons or employees can choose from. So I mean, I really don't think you're cannibalizing anybody. I think it's just, no.
It looks, so,
And I can go to the SAU, I'm sure, and say, I would like a copy of this. I don't know, I don't own a computer, but maybe on the website, if you have a website for the school.
sorry, that's my comment. The point is that the information is available, we have it. I thought we were talking about the staff salaries and benefits page that we'll have in our annual district report. I don't want that information going on that page. That doesn't mean that information is not available, it isn't in the book because it is under the budget. But I don't think that it's relevant to have that published on the same page that we have our employees' names listed with their salaries, is what my point is.
Well, I don't think
Just
there's
makes
any
it
numbers.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, so I'm not saying the information shouldn't be available, it shouldn't be discussed. What I'm saying is it shouldn't go on that page in that format.
And it is available, as Kevin
Yeah.
says it on, he's
Right
got
here, I
it
can
on
do
the
it.
website.
Yeah,
And we can discuss it at another time, but I think what Jerry's trying to say is that if you marry the two information-wise on the same page, we lead people down a conversation path that, A, we can't talk about, and that we shouldn't be talking about. So that's all. The information is available, and we can discuss it at another meeting, and they do have it discussed at the SAU level. They have several meetings about the insurance rates and all that information and the quotes and everything that goes on with it. So it's not like we're hiding anything, it's just, I think Jerry's right, putting it on the same page may lead to conversations or speculation that may be inappropriate.
So-
And not necessary.
There is our differences.
Yeah.
Just a forethought, I mean, you have an index in the front of your book that tells you what's inside your book. That information could be in the back of the book, offerings for health insurance for our employees or something like that. Thank you for listening.
Moving on to instructional issues. Sorry, hold on. Jen brought up at the beginning of the meeting about items that probably should have gotten under old business and haven't been yet. So you take those, Janice.
In the meetings from the last we discussed whether we were getting granting permission to have the personnel policy at the library. I don't know if we followed up on that, but we said we would in the last minutes, so I'm just following up on that to see if we can do that.
At the Jackson.
Yep, at the Jackson
Hard
Library.
copy, is that what?
Yeah, I would assume a hard copy, or if there's a online file that you want to attach to their, somewhere. That was a request, so it seemed simple enough to fulfill.
Would it be possible to publish the website information, or not the website information, but the healthcare information at the library as well, so people can walk in there and get that if they don't have a computer? So it's not just walk in here and get it?
It's listed in our policy document anyways, personnel
Well,
policies has a.
they're talking about the actual rates. Is what you're looking at. Yeah, that could be a page that goes.
Could you do that for us, so that if someone
Well, we
wants to?
should talk about that, it's kind of no different than,
No,
It means a lot different.
Yeah, it's separate, it's
Okay.
totally separate.
The information is available, it's public information, it should be given, because I don't see the point of putting it underneath the names of our actual employees. To what purpose is that, and is what the point is. I think that the information should be available in how it's most easily available, so, but as far as publishing it in our annual district report, that's kind of what I was referencing. So, this is bus for,
This was, Andy was discussing this last time, I think Andy was gonna ask a question about the bus from Bartlett.
Yes, which, and as I was reviewing the minutes, I realized I did not do that, and I apologize. But I will,
I just want to make sure they get lost.
no, it's not a lot, and I think the season's now up and going, and so I will get it done by the end of vacation, so it can be kind of a pipeline of discussion with the schools. This was just about getting the bus for Nordic kids, whether skis on the bus, or to Bear Notch, or.
it's what it should be, the board tasked the bus committee with, the transportation committee with?
Well, yeah, I mean, I offered to draft a letter.
So, no, it's an environmental thing first, right?
And I think it's a Joe Rossi thing first. Would be my view, I would have done first, you know. I'll float the letter out there to you guys,
Yeah.
and send it.
I just, if you had found information, I didn't know.
I don't know.
All right. I think
We
the other
did
things are
this.
covered, yeah. Thank you.
Now we'll move on to instructional issues.
I don't know.
You got that, Jen? There's no personnel actions. Any questions, comments on the budget status? Brings us to reviewing the 2018-2019 proposed budget. Again, this is not a public hearing on this one, we would have a total review of the budget. This is just our the first look at the proposed budget and meeting. Maybe want to walk us through any?
Yeah, you got it. So, what you'll see, there were a couple of changes. We'll start off on the front page. So you'll see the overall budget is up 1.54%, or $39,243. And that's before any warrant articles or any other business. Under summary of proposed increases or decreases, you'll see that the salaries and the staffing is increased by $36,000. And that includes the enrichment, the personalized learning coach increased by 0.3 positions, so 70% up to a full-time position. That also increases the technology by 1 hour a week, no, I'm sorry,
7
going
hours.
from 8 to 14 hours a week. And then the world language, I'm sorry, jumped from 6 to 7 hours a week. So with those changes and then the performance-based salary potential for the staff members, the overall increase is $36,000. We can go through our line if you'd like to a little bit later on. Health insurance, dental and life insurance. So this gets to the point that was brought up earlier. Last year, Jackson was part of a group that did go out and shop around, resulting in health insurance decrease. So Bartlett, Jackson, and some Conway non-contracted folks, and one contracted group, about 85 to 100 people. We get the ratings, and they did comparative shopping. The result was a decrease in the insurance premiums for the Jackson folks. This year's health insurance was originally estimated at 15%, came in at 6.97%. So the overall health insurance, including when that 0.7% turned into full-time, those health benefits, it's still a decrease of $15,800. So that's good news as far as the health insurance.
Kevin, that 6.97%, that's the guaranteed maximum.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so it may come down even a little bit more. And then you'll see FICA, retirement, and again, those increases jump up a little bit. At the top, you'll also see, because health insurance went down for the SAU staff, the original budget dropped down about $1,279. That's at the very top of the page on the cover sheet. And you'll see that reflected as well. If we go to the second cover page, which is the summary sheet, you'll see special education actually decreases by $11,000. That has to do with some services and placement changes for some of the students. Then we get to the tuition, and essentially,
can I pull you back for 1 second? When we met at the budget meeting, there was information that those costs were going down also in relation to the preschool perhaps happening. Is that true?
No, we built in tuition, because should they not pass, we still have to have tuition for those students who are receiving special ed services from the local.
So that's why on the warrant article, you'll see preschool is first. So you have to raise that money, and then you may adjust the operating budget accordingly should the preschool article pass. So your tuition, you're down to one middle school student. In the high school, tuition is basically the same number, but because Jackson's population has stayed in the sending towns, that decreased the number, your greater percentage at the high school level, which is the increase of 28,000. Overall, your tuition is up $2,355. The next section, maintenance. You'll see, and there will be probably one more adjustment to utilities and fuel oil moving forward. And you'll see the fuel oil will actually be decreased by an amount of about $1,500 because Jim Hill just locked in at $2.15 a gallon, whereas originally $2.50. So that number will decrease as well.
15, 215?
$2.15, yeah. So overall, and you'll see a decrease in the contracted services, operation and maintenance of plant. So there were some adjustments that were made, but because John did some work with the key card system last year, that gets pulled out. But then you'll also, as we move down through the budget, there's $15,000 to address the siding on this building. So there's kind of some move-ins and move-outs there. And that's your maintenance budget. If you continue, you'll see the rest of the budget. You'll see some of the SAU shares up again. Your percentage changes a little bit. And staff development curriculum, there's some pieces that Gail put in the budget to address some changes in development around competency-based education. And the rest is just some lines back and forth. Supplies for the buses. Jim takes a 3-year average for both the repairs and the supplies. So that makes up the summary of the increases to the Jackson School District. If you want to go to the page that have the numbers on the bottom, I can give you again where things show up. So page 1, you'll see the couple different pieces, that 30% personalized learning coordinator. So there's a big jump in the salary increases there. You'll see the decrease in the health insurance. And then you'll see health, dental, life insurance for the personalized learning coach. That's a number that we budget, depending upon who that person is.
Yeah,
Yes.
can you explain what that is? I think I missed that, the personal learning coordinator.
Yeah, that is the position that was being discussed earlier, the mentor coach. That is the person who will be dealing with some extended learning opportunities, some transitional pieces, student-led conferencing that Gail mentioned as well. So it's an increase to the position that was formerly titled enrichment.
Right.
Yes. And that will hopefully help transition further into 7th and potentially 8th grade from Bartlett as well.
So this is a similar position to what we're talking to for the transition to high school. So I guess I want to come back to being confused then. Why is there all this discussion about what the job description would be if we have it?
Well, we didn't know Gail was already working on it, and this is, and to be honest, I think this is.
But it was just before, it was at 70%. And the only change is it's going
No,
down.
ours is a little bigger, I think Jessica
It was 50%
Yeah.
special educator
Yeah.
and 20% enrichment. So what we've actually done is taken a .2, 20% position and expanded that to a 50% position.
Okay.
So what's the bottom line? What are we gonna see for the kids?
We're going to see more mentorships. We're going to do interest inventories and work with the classroom teachers so that kids can be studying topics of interest, bringing in people from the community. We've always had a lot of community members who want to come in and share their learning with us, but if we get a youngster who, say, is interested in floral design, find a way to get that student to Cary or somewhere locally. And we have a student who's interested in art, find ways to help get them to Melanie or somebody locally that can be a mentor and an inspiration and to help the kids kind of detail their learning through their interests
And if any, I think that was a good question. Process-wise at this point, I think that the board needs to kind of wrap our heads around this a little bit. And at this point in time, this is where it would be appropriate for the board to say, this is something that we're going to endorse and move ahead for our budget, or we're not going to do that. Let's assume that if we do that, Penny, then I think from the public standpoint, what you would do is at our budget hearing, you would come to us and say, this is something that I think the town should have, and this is something I don't think the town should have. And at that point in time, the board would then have another opportunity to say, okay, we're going to pull this out of the budget, or we're going to keep it in the budget. So I think that this is kind of a learning spot for all of us. That's why I appreciate the question, because it was good. It was good to instigate the conversation.
Because I did discuss it, and I do have a tentative draft of a job description that I presented to the budget committee, so I don't have it with me right here, but.
It might help to just clarify real quickly that we, in response to the discussions that various of us have had with folks and what everyone's bringing to the table and what Gail has talked to us about, last month we started talking about the idea that wouldn't it be beneficial to our students if we had someone who knew them sort of from K through 12 and that could help bridge gaps, whether they're in the school here or getting them to middle school and then keeping an eye on them in middle school and high school to kind of just keep track of things. And that's a very vague term, but we don't have time tonight to go into all the details of it. So at that meeting last month, Keith very rightly said, well, what would that look like? And don't we already have that? So that's when we said to Kevin, well, can you get us the job descriptions? I had been thinking about some things at home and spoke to some of the other board members, put some things in writing to kind of move forward with that. Unbeknownst to us, Gail was also looking separately to enhance what was being offered through faculty and staff that we already have here. So when we came to the budget meeting, that was the first we had heard that she had been working on this sort of separately. So that's why it's confusing, is we've had one whole conversation last month, but she has had some ideas about how to maybe even do it more cost effectively than we could have done.
And I was just going to say, I think that one of the things I find interesting about the way it's been proposed is that, again, I think it's very important for first of all, say, what we're proposing a new position in the school, is what we're proposing. And an increase to our salary, our staff, that's what we're talking about, whether that person is 50% this, 50% that is, we're talking about a 50% position specifically for a task to be performed. So that's an increase to our staffing is what we're talking about. And I really love the way you phrased that question, which was,
What are we going to see with what it is?
and that's something that, that boards and administrators and educational consultants, they toss around lots of different words. And at the end of the day, it really comes down to, what is this going to mean for our kids? And I think that's something that the board's going to have to keep very aware of as we move through this process. I can say that the way Gail's put this together, from my standpoint, I think it's pretty impressive. I think it's a very cost-effective way to do it. It's a step in the right direction. It's not a big leap at this point in time, and it's kind of testing the waters. And I think it's a great proposal, a great way to do it. But again, this is new to us tonight. It's new to the town. We are proposing adding more to our staff at the grammar school, and from a process standpoint, again, come to us and let us know how you feel about it.
So then but I also think it starts with that we're changing, we're going to a different way of educating our students. So it's not the same old in the classrooms anymore. It's competency-based, it's more individual learning. There's more options for all levels of students. and this is where I think we need that extra.
And I think that conversation is good, so when someone comes to us at our budget hearing and says, why are you doing this, we don't like this position, this is just added to the budget, that's when we're gonna have to kind of flush out more. Jen said, this is why I'm doing it.
So I guess what I feel like is every year I'm told to come to these meetings, come to the budget hearings, and now I'm being told that we don't have time to discuss it. I mean, I understand you don't have all of the answers tonight, but we're getting down to crunch time in terms of what's, the final budget that's going to be proposed in March. So when is a good time? When is a good time to get feedback from the public and discuss it in public setting so everybody can hear the responses?
But this is why this is a public setting, this is why the information's out there. We typically engage a lot more with the audience than most boards would, because we're a small town, and I think it's best in town that we do this way, because it's a great way to communicate and a great way to learn things. The way you asked that question to me was great, because it brings it back down to the importance of it, and to keep focused on that. But we are participating tonight in doing this. This is an exchange, but the real exchange, the real process would say that at our budget hearing, you would come to us and say, you're either you're in support of it or not in support of it in our budget, and why, and then we would have to respond to you with it. That's our process. That's what it does look like.
I just want to learn more before.
Right, and I appreciate that, and so maybe, we can discuss as a board, maybe having another listening poster, more casual meeting with the community to reaffirm and educate what is going on with the education system.
And that discussion for us isn't new. We've been having this for really the last year, but pretty more aggressively the last 6 months. We've been talking about it at every meeting. It's when we do it.
But you're not going to get to the nitty gritty. It's just, the board meetings, these board meetings go by so quickly. It's a quick topic on the.
And I agree with you, Penny, there is a lot that goes by, and it's hard, the kids are moving upward, and a lot of this change is happening in the younger grades, and they're happening at the SAU level, and we've been having other meetings about it, and trying to attend off-site, open to the public, off-site other things as well, to learn more about competency-based learning and curriculum, and I'm saying all the names wrong, I'm sure.
But there's just a quick practical, so that you understand where we're at. We started a pretty in-depth conversation last month, and we left that meeting with the understanding that I would send a document to the board for review to start a conversation. It was literally one board member, and we can't act as individuals. It was me sharing thoughts and trying to summarize conversations that we've been having for a year or so. In the meantime, we basically have had, in addition to our budget, from our principals saying this is a need we find, that this is, I'm trying to respond to the needs that we're hearing about every month. Those of us on the budget committee talked about it with Gail, but I think it's news to the rest of you tonight. Is that right, Gail?
Yeah, it was really two separate things.
They're two
I think is
separate.
where- So this, what Gail mentioned is along the lines of what Jess has been talking about, but not the same thing. That's the part we don't know anything about yet. We
That's why
have
he
to
was
talk,
like,
if
what?
we don't feel about it, we need that position. So that's separate.
I guess what I'm trying to get to is now's the time for the board to do that. We need to do that amongst ourselves to have a more transparent and better discussion with the public about it. We've been talking about these types of things for a while now. This is when, tonight is right now, when it's pretty concrete for us. And that's why it's kind of tough to say, well, this is where we want the public information and input, because we're not prepared to do that because we haven't done it amongst ourselves. So we've been, the position's been proposed to us tonight, and now we need to discuss as a board and say, okay, do we want to keep this position in the budget or not? We can say to Gail tonight, we're pulling this out of the budget, we don't want it in there. Or we can say tonight, yes, we want to move ahead with it. So I'd kind of like to have the discussion with just the board for the next few moments anyway, to wrap our head around that. And I guess that's what I'm trying to do. We want to go through the rest of the budget and come back to it. We want to, since we're kind of hot into it right now, just flush it through. So
So I know one of the things that was discussed last month, there was, I think myself and Keith, where our knee-jerk reactions were like, oh, we have vision. So, and I understand it's very different. But now I'm also completely, I'm flipped, and I know it's just semantics and it's word that's said, but when I hear something like, one of the things I'm doing is keeping track of things. So yes, I know this education is changing, and I think it's changing for the better. And so maybe this position that's being created is what we need, but now I flip to, do we need Vicky? is just, if one of her jobs is keeping track of things, that's definitely what Vicky does.
I was assuming it was the same person, just taking more out.
So I guess we need to be careful, I mean, I know it's semantics, but initially I was like, well, do we need this because we have Vicky? But now I'm thinking, okay, we need this is good, but do we need Vicky?
Vicki works only at the high school and the middle school. She does not work at all with our students. And so, kind of for instance, you just had those 6 kiddos that did this presentation, and Chris Doctor did a wonderful job. So maybe 2 or 3 of them want to know more about an architect. So this person would contact Chris, set up meetings for him to come meet the students, maybe field trips, maybe off-site visits to a building site, to help that child look into that interest. Is this something I really want to do or not? What's needed for math? What's needed for all the, how do I get to be an architect? What's needed for schooling? So we also have had goal-setting meetings with all the students, and some of the kids have different goals in different areas. So this person's more of a liaison. It's the teacher's responsibility to track their academic growth. But this person's going to take the goals that the student has, the goals that the teachers have, the known competencies, and then find resources and match them with resources, whether that's going out of the district or out of the building or within the building, having people come in.
Which I guess my point is, and I hate saying Vicky's job because I like putting a name on it, I keep forgetting what it's actually called.
Family support liaison.
Thank you, family support liaison. And there's another word that's encountered again, liaison. So if the goal is eventually that this position help they get to know the kids, and all of a sudden they're in middle school, and they get to know the kids even better, and they're in high school, this is, I'm getting the sense that this is a job that will continue and grow through high school. So yes, maybe the family liaison shouldn't be gone this year, but it seems to me that that's the direction this is heading, that it'll be a more encompassing position. And yeah, they're helping 2 or 3 kids find architects. Do they also have time to help some middle school kids? I mean, how filled is this position going to be at this salary with this, and I know we don't know yet, but
I think at the end, that's kind of the way I view it too. And I think that one of the things we have to take in mind is that we need to be redefining several different jobs throughout the whole process. By we, I don't mean just the Jackson School District. I mean, if the way it's changing, there might be, the roles of teachers might change, the roles of support staff might change, the roles of guidance counselors might change along the way. Do you do all that at once? Obviously not. You start in directions and head that way. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. To me, what we've been discussing over the last few months, and last month in particular, was what's proposed tonight, and I'm very impressed with it. And personally, I'd like to keep this in the budget and continue to flush it through. Let's say we get to March or May, and Gail and the staff has come back to us and said, you know what, we've done this all the way through, it's not going to work. They'll say that to us then. But unfortunately, the way our budget works, we basically have to decide between now and January whether we're going to do this or not. And I guess what does the board want to see to flush that out more? I'm comfortable with it, but I understand a lot more in my mind, I guess, because I'm in my mind. But then others might say, what do we want to see for a process to determine? Because I love the fact that it's been proposed to us. Do we want to keep it as a proposal in here? Do we want to have a subcommittee look at it more? I guess what more information do board members actually want to have on this to be comfortable with keeping it in here?
So I'm for this, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you give me the wrong answer, I might not be for it. This is only to help the students in this Jackson Grammar School. This person's, yeah.
Yes.
I would be for something like that. I still am not on board with the rest of you guys on the other position that we're talking about.
So we have an agreement from Kay, so let's move on.
Well, I'm for this, and I'm in support of this. I've had the luxury of seeing that job description, that might be helpful to people, but I do think we need to have a separate conversation. And part of the prompt from last month is, and I think we're learning something tonight, is that we have positions we don't even know how they're described in a formal job description. So I think we have an obligation to follow up on that. And what I forwarded last month was a prompt to define our terms and to understand our goals so that we can figure out, are those needs being met in a way by Vicki or by guidance counselor or now this personalized learning coach. So I think we do have an obligation to have a separate conversation which will entail feedback from folks. And I have to be honest, Penny, part of the reason I felt motivated to take on this a little bit, and again, this was just one board member prompting, right, getting something in writing so that we can all use the same topic, and the same words, was because of conversations from you and things that I learned from that preschool committee about the needs of our students as they go through, and hearing what other board members had to say about, our obligation doesn't end at 6th grade. So this is one effort to try to respond to those things and to have that conversation. So it just so happens, there's a separate thing coming at us tonight from the budget, which is quite new.
Food totally different than.
Yeah.
Kind of overlap a little bit, food totally different.
And I also, I agree with both of you, and I think that we need to take maybe one more step backwards as we get to the meeting before then, is to help bring the community who has students in school or had students in school, and help remind them or educate them about where education is going and because we're changing our philosophy on education, what we would like to see happen. Hence, now we feel we need this support role. So you're asking people to approve a support role when you're not really explaining the core reason of why we're changing, what's changing. So I think we need to help people in the regular community appreciate what we're trying to do as a school district and where Jackson is, and we're ahead of the curve. And because we're ahead of the curve, we're already doing these things, and we're already doing the individual learning plans with each student, now we see that we have an opportunity to do this, to make it grow and be more successful. So without telling people what's changing, you're asking them to approve a position when they don't really, we get it, because we've been doing that for a while. But again, I'm hearing from Penny that you may not be aware that we're moving in this kind of year, which means it's just one person out of 800. So I think there's an opportunity there. I don't have to get to the meeting and have to explain, and kind of get everybody on the same train that we're going in this direction from an educational standpoint. That's why we need the position. So let's
Well, I think
educate the masses
would be for us to continue the conversation with Gail with the job description and things like that. Because have we all seen them?
There are things on before that. Where we're going with the school, why do we need the job? Because we're actually going with more individual learning plans, and we're trying to bring more to the students. So that's what the goal is. So I don't know if we need to have a listening post to we've already had these meetings at the higher level, so maybe just another.
Well, there's been discussion about competency-based education. I mean, that's been.
But I don't know if everybody's.
But there has been discussion about it, but I think that one way to maybe characterize it would be that one of the goals for the school district for years now has been to meet the learning potential of every individual student. And really what competency-based education means to me is translating that into reality, meaning you're taking the resources and applying them to the individual students so that they meet their learning potential. And I think that the position being proposed this evening is a position that will be the main staff resource to make sure that each individual student in Jackson Grammar School is meeting their learning potential. It's really more in a more comprehensive way. It's not that they're meeting the standard of a fourth grader. They're meeting the standards that they're not only of a fourth grader, but whatever other abilities that student's able to achieve. And that's kind of the idea behind it.
Thank you. I mean,
So it sounds like we should have a listening post before the next meeting, since it's
Well,
budget.
I mean, we've all been confused on two different things. Right now, I don't know that we're really, I think the next discussion we have is much bigger than this.
Right, that's the beyond this budget,
Yeah.
that's what you're talking about, Keaton, and I agree, but I think our budget hearing accomplishes that, Andy. If tonight we decide to keep this in the budget for our budget hearing in January, that's when we don't need a listening post for that, that's just when people come and say, hey, we think this is a great idea, hey, we think it's a really bad idea, pull it out of there.
We're talking about the other option, dollar-wise, it's going to be much, much more than obviously we would want to educate somebody.
I think for the
And
business,
also, I just want to be clear, that the other option could just entail clarifying things that are already in place. So it will be a conversation.
And you'll have one more meeting in January before the hearing, which is in February. So,
Okay, sorry, thanks.
yeah, so this is essentially your first look at the entire budget. It'll come back to you in January. At that point, you'll make decisions about finalizing your budget. That will go on the warrant. You'll finalize your articles for the warrant. And then you'll have the hearing in February. So, if
Would
there's
you be able to give us a copy of that job description?
Yeah, we'll
before-
find out tomorrow, the next day, if they're all set.
Let's
I
move on
apologize for the fact
from that one to now, and we can go through the rest of the budget tomorrow. If you want to come back to that again.
So page 2, again, these are the individual lines. You'll see the tuition, basically your supplies, your consumables. Just a couple ups and downs, minor changes. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Then you start to see some of your ESOL, your special education salaries. On the bottom of page 2, page 3. Again, you'll have special education moving through, and then you have your co-curricular pieces. All those essentially stay the same, minor ups and downs. Change of $120 at the bottom of page 3. You'll see some on page 4, guidance, health, contracted services, psychological and speech services.
Can I just back up one? Can you just help me real quick to understand the difference, what the artist in residence does over the art teacher?
There are 2 artists in residencies. One goes to things like children's stage adventures, for people who come in for musical productions. The other goes with Carrie to offer after-school programs, lunchtime, art classes. She maintains the front, so that she has tasks that go beyond her school day.
Do you have any stage adventures?
Page 5, you'll see, again, some further changes. That tech coordinator piece, that's the increased hours from 8 to 14. So we see some changes in staff development, again, to support the training toward competency-based education. Library essentially stays the same. Then you work down your school board services. It's a $400 increase. Page 6. See the SAU, salaried principal, software, hardware, then the operation and maintenance of the plants at the bottom of page 6. And on page 7, again, there will be an adjustment to the heat fuel oil, and it will drop down about $1,500. You'll see some minor increases, decreases. I think contracted services grounds, there's some seal coating that was going to take place here.
Yes.
That was pretty much the bump there. And then transportation. And then to page 8. And you get to the bottom. And you can see your total operating costs. You'll see some of the grant expenditures moving forward. At the bottom of page 9, that's the total appropriation that's needed. Page 10 are your capital reserves. So you'll see the bus has 108,000. Special Education Trust has 116,000. Your tuition trust is 73,000. Maintenance Trust Fund 76, and the Whitney Maintenance Trust at 42.
On the capital reserve funds, when we're scheduled by us,
Yep, Jim said next year,
so we're,
I believe it's next year.
what we,
So you have 108,000, bus typically costs 90,000. So
I think we usually take what, half of it.
about 45,000 you take out of that.
We're in good shape. though.
You're in real good
We're in good
shape.
shape.
So when you get to the warrants, you can decide whether you want to continue to put money in or not. Sure.
the special education fund, we capped that at 100,000, and I understand why it's at 116 now. We've been recommended, I think, the previous 2 years, that we should think about increasing that. So if anyone thinks that we should increase that, let's consider that anyway.
Is that a recommendation from the state?
No, it's from Pam. And I think Gail's actually cautioned us about that a couple times.
Well,
too.
it's, an out-of-district placement
Right.
is quite expensive.
So, I mean, I guess is it just because costs have gone up, or is it because we,
There's nothing on the radar, it's only because costs have gone up.
Right.
Since we put the $100,000 cap, I think that was probably 10 years ago, actually, 10 years. It was a long time ago. Costs have increased significantly
Okay.
since then for those, so that's why we should maybe consider increasing that.
Kind of really we should this year.
I mean, I'm not making a motion, I think so, but.
Yeah.
When we get to the warrant, that's when we can discuss what we want to add or.
Sounds good.
And then you can flip the page and you get to the estimated revenue page. So, as you folks know, kindergarten, garden, if you will. It's about $1,100 per kindergarten student. So we budgeted for 8 kindergarten students next year as revenue. And then you'll see the grants coming in at 26,000, lunch, milk reimbursement, and then you'll see national forest funds. That's a conservative estimate, but it has gone down over the past few years. So if it comes in over that, you're there. Revenue from local sources, you do get some tuition for some of your summer program. Private tuition, that would be for students who come from the outside. We do have one staff member, child who comes in. And then other locals. So what that was remember you got, you kind of, not really a settlement, but you get a check back for the siding. That was part of that. You get some money from the Whitney Center as well. And then there's some insurance cards. So those flux cards, if you will, those unexpended pieces roll into that revenue. And then working your way down, rental of facilities, again, those are estimated. Contribution to the trust fund, 9,000. Sale of lunches and milk, 8,500. And then you'll see the adequacy grant that did go to 0 last year. And then you'll see the education tax retained, and that's your district assessment, $1524,499. Flip the page to the last page, that's your estimated tax information. So you'll see that just for the operating budget, $6.11 per thousand, 2-cent increase or 0.39%. We'll discuss the articles tonight, and you'll those will be added. Again, tonight is just a night to figure out what you'd like to see in January. And with a little bit more information, we can make adjustments and get that information to you. That's your operating budget.
Thank you.
Any board members have any questions?
Thank you, Scott.
Merry
I'm just, because I'm just asking questions about the salary for Gail, because it's separated out here. So I have something to compare to. So one thing I don't understand is what came from the SAU for fiscal year 2016, 2017 was a salary of $84,688. But it doesn't match up with anything on this. So I'm confused. And from the SAU, it did take out the longevity stipend and the statutory benefits. So that $84,688 is just the salary. So I'm just trying to figure out.
Was that for last year?
Fiscal year 2016, 2017.
Okay, so this is 18-19. So, okay, so prior to this budget, so if you go to page 6,
Yep,
and you go under Office of the Principal,
yep,
prior to this budget, that was paid differently, okay? So that was found on page 6 under line, you'll see 63,136.
yep.
But part of her salary was back on, if you go to page 1, in about the 4th line down, there's a little note that says, notice,
Yep.
.25 teaching principal to 100% principal. So notice that the line from 2017-18, the salary line to 2018-19 actually is a decrease there, even with increased salaries. So that money was transferred from that line over to the principal line on page 6.
And so, on a different question.
Sure.
Same one, page 6, salary teaching principal. So the adopted budget in 2017-18 was $63,136. Would you take that plus the performance-based salary increase from the same year? Should that then equal the proposed budget for 2018-19?
So-
Her salary's an increase, according to this, just from the 2016-2017, it's an increase of 37%.
But what you want to take into consideration is that 25% teaching salary that was in
Added.
the other, right.
It was taken out of one line and put into another.
So if you were to take Gail's salary total from last year to this year, it essentially includes, I think, a 3% increase to her salary.
2.5.
2.5.
Okay.
Up to.
Another question was on the guidance. And just wondering, between 2016-17 through 2018-19 proposed is a 20% increase over 2 years. Is that?
On page 4?
Oh, sorry, page 4, salaries for.
You had different staff members during that time, didn't you?
Yes.
So there are different people who held those jobs, so the salaries weren't the same each. You had somebody else, so when you hired somebody new, they might have more experience and more degrees.
There's one thing that's concerning, that's food for thought, is that with the proposed new position, the TLC, whatever it's called, that even though special ed might be down this year, we know it goes like this, and once we get a new position, we're pretty hard to back it out with the population on the decrease. I know next year we do have a big commitment. Wondering if you've examined at all how that role could be managed using existing resources. I don't know their responses.
Think so? Good. Move on to the warrant articles. Karen, there's a little piece on the warrant articles. Can we put Article 1 before Article 2? This article?
You actually have to do that.
If you don't have this, when it just.
So
I thought that the operating budget had to be the first article.
no, because what happens is you have some staffing in Article 1 that you would deduct from Article 2 potentially related to special education.
So I understand that in the cost standpoint, but I just.
So you can't approve Article 2 and then approve Article 2. That's what I was told.
That's correct. I thought sometimes when it came down, so yes, that's someone to make a motion to consider Article 2 over Article 1, when Article 2 had to be determined before the other article. I thought logistically the operating budget had to be the first article after all voted on articles. But that was.
I'll double check that, but I believe that was the answer that we got from the DI.
I wouldn't question that.
Yeah.
There's no reason to. Bill. Nice.
So I believe Gail has a number in, she can speak to Article 1 related to preschool.
So we were just talking a little while ago, thanks to Andy, about the location for the preschool. And we looked at a number of options. After looking at all of the spaces in the building, we looked at reconfiguring classrooms, putting 4, 5, 6 together, using the older classrooms. We looked at a whole host of different options, and I did that with the entire staff. We came down to the fact that the library, the common library, would probably be the best location for our preschool. So that then means where do we locate our books in our library? So when I came to the budget committee, I had proposed, and to the facilities committee, I had proposed to build a room in the basement. We had looked into the feasibility of that exits the safety, life safety laws and things like that, and found that that was a viable option. John drew up a plan, and we had a contractor take a look at it, but it came in about $25,000. Whereupon the budget committee said, you need to go back and get creative and sharpen your pencil because we can't bring a number to our community that's higher than what you had budgeted. So I did that. We looked at just about every potential spot for the library or ways that we could, over time, build a space for the library. So what I'm proposing to do is to, and it's detailed in this chart, for the warrant, the salary and benefits for the staff has to stay there. And by moving some of the costs out, you would have seen in our original budget some grant items. There are some things that we can use our IDEA or special ed grant for. We have other grants, the REAP Small Rural Schools Grant, Title II grant. There are a number of grants that we get at a district, as a district. So by pulling pieces and parts of the supplies and the furniture and the curriculum out of the warrant and using grant funds for that, we would be able to have approximately $15,000 for the infrastructure modifications required for the library. The difference with those two options is rather than having a contractor come in and have it built by September, John would do the work himself, but it would take him a longer period of time. So we need a temporary kind of fix or holding for the library, which was one of the options we looked at the Whitney Center for, locating the books here and using the classroom for the classes. Since that was not an option, we looked at office space within the current building, and John feels like he can reconfigure the nurse's office temporarily for books, and the library classes would maybe be in a mobile cart and move with the teacher from room to room. So library itself would be, the book stacks would be available to students in the office spaces, and the classes would take place in the classroom while we build the room we originally planned in the basement. But that all keeps the warrant at the same amount of $114,283 that we had originally proposed. And then on the back page, you'll see the related expenses that we would use in grant fund to purchase.
Thank you, Gail. I know that was a lot of work. I appreciate it.
This is just me being nitpicky, and the ideas were floating in my head of what can happen with the library. And I know classrooms are tight, even in our school with the numbers as they are, but I mean, I can't envision the nurse's office right now, but could each classroom, however it's configured, have the appropriate books on those cards just in the classrooms?
That certainly is an option as well that we considered. Before I commit to one or the other option, I want to have an opportunity to get the whole staff together and to really evaluate the implications of that location, the classroom location, the larger room at the end, what's the special ed office could also be an option. So I think I'd like to weigh out those options with the faculty and how all three things could potentially work before I commit to one option or another. But it looks like one way or another we could temporarily house the books and do library in the classrooms.
And there weren't any large desktop computers?
There are desktop computers. We now, though, have a one-to-one with laptops and iPads available, so those are extras, so to speak, that the kids use while they're in library, but they would still be able to use laptops or iPads.
A few people in the community expressed that particular thing. Your answer was what I gave them. That's good.
So Gail, the actual cost here is $126,831, is that right?
That's what would go on the warrant. I know we've had all this discussion about the real costs would still involve the grant amounts. It's just that I wouldn't be asking the district budget to support these items. I'd be using grants that we currently have available to us.
So these are guaranteed to cover those costs?
Yes, and I also noted that we have a donation as well that reduces the amounts even.
Is there any talk of the of fundraising for the student body, like the ski-a-thon, they pick a fundraiser each year? I'm just asking.
Not for this year. I mean, we're talking about the ski-a-thon perhaps for the pavilion, a number of options, but not for this year.
Thank you for reworking this.
One thing I think we should consider is, next year we're talking about a temporary fix. It's how many years could we float the temporary fix if our ultimate goal is to have a larger preschool space to use, and which means utilizing our building differently, meaning doing something with the upstairs if that's viable, or building a new building or room on the existing building. Do we want to waste $15,000 for something that's a temporary fix? So I'm not saying that we should take that money out for revamping the basement. I'm saying let's leave that in there, but at the same time, I think that we should task a building committee with finding space, because ultimately, I don't think that the conference library room is really ideal for a preschool. Versus, there's options we have. We can look at the upstairs space. We can look at adding a whole other room onto the building. I think that it's time to consider that at this point, and not for putting in the budget for next year, but for trying to figure out what we do with that money. Because let's say in the next 6 months we decide that, hey, we're going to redo the upstairs and it's going to cost us $150,000, so we're going to build a new room on the building here, then we probably wouldn't want to spend that $15,000 in the basement if we can float a temporary fix for 2 school years. Just a thought, anyway. So I think that,
I would say take it. We can get to a year of preschool, it can always go in the budget next year. Because even if this gets completed, it wouldn't be available to us for the next school year, correct? That was my impression, that no, it wouldn't be available for the next school year.
you know, I think it's not something that there next week, there's some, so that's why it's not about that.
Oh,
Let's say that the building committee and schools, okay, wait, we're not gonna do anything to the campus, we're gonna keep it the same. We would, this does work, that we can put the preschool in this room for now. That might not always be where it is, depending upon the population fluctuations as they come through. The rooms might shift where everybody is, but we don't need to change anything. Other than have a space in the basement for our library, that might be the ultimate fix. And right now, it looks like our best and lowest cost option and keep everything else the same. But what if there's better alternatives? That's why I would like to see the money kept in there for next year, but I'd also like to see us consider bigger options for the long run.
But, I mean, when we're talking about bigger and better options, which, I mean, I'd love to see, build it and they will come, and our preschool grows, and those people are moving into the community, and it's, and it's viable for that, but the better option we're talking about is really for the preschool space. In my mind, the basement could be the ultimate best spot for the Jackson Grammar School library. And if we build it, then it's built and it's there, and, because what we're talking about, when you're talking about adding on, you're not talking about adding on so we can have a big preschool and move the library back upstairs, or are you?
No, what I'm saying is that the conference room isn't big enough room ultimately for preschool, so that's
Correct.
That's why we would have to look at other options that isn't the library being in the basement. In other words, if we want a bigger room for our preschool, and we need bigger rooms for all the other classes as well, then our current building isn't of sufficient size unless we utilize the upstairs or build a new room.
I guess I'm a little confused, but I mean, I still think we should move, my thought is we should move forward with making the basement viable for the library. Because that could be ultimately where the library stays, even if we build a beautiful addition.
What I'm saying is I agree, but before we actually spend the money to do it, I think that we should try to at least solve the bigger picture problem. Meaning like before we go ahead and spend $15,000 on moving the library into the basement, if we're going to ultimately build a bigger space for preschool, and not necessarily for preschool, maybe it would be when the sixth graders would go up and downstairs per se. Or there's a whole other room built on the building, maybe that would be the preschool room, but you build the ideal preschool room, meaning big enough size to accommodate the number of kids we could ultimately have in there, with the proper bathroom, with the proper sinks and utility space that you need for preschool. What I'm saying is ultimately, the conference library room is in my mind not ideal for preschool, but it is a place that we can use and it doesn't work. But if ultimately we're going to invest in our community with a preschool and a K through 6 student body population, we're going to need to add on to the building. And in which case, if we can float temporary library space for 2 years, why waste that $15,000 for building in the basement that's not ultimately going to stay there? Unless that room necessarily can be used for other purposes.
Right, well,
built away.
I guess that was kind of my point.
Right,
Maybe it would stay there, even if we built a beautiful new addition.
But anyway, that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying, I'd say let's keep that money in there because it looks like that might be the right thing to do in the short run. But at the same time, before we spend that money, let's get a better idea. Because we're not talking about spending that money in July, or maybe.
I thought we were.
Yeah, it's starting about getting it work right away. It's probably
But-
really down in that.
When I say between now and July, let's at least make an attempt at getting a better sense of what we want our building to look like. There's no reason not to.
Part of me wants to take it out.
It would force that conversation where I think you're in the minority.
I mean, maybe, but I'll tell you, one of the reasons is, we're all for preschool, right? We all voted up, and we said
That
we're
was
for
the map, which
preschool.
is what I was comfortable.
Yeah, so
Sorry.
if that's not gonna be something that's really gonna help us with this current year, let's try to get that total number lower. Maybe make it-
I think that why that's legitimate, Keith, is because that $15,000 that's left in there isn't for the preschool. It's for the library, which we're saying already that there's already a short-term fix for. So there is a good reason to pull it out of there.
Can you clarify for me, so this would not benefit the preschool in its first year if it's passed?
Well, because if we had a contractor come in, he could get it built and ready by the fall. John has the rest of the plant to take care of all summer long. He will do a lot of the work of his own. He'll have to contract with an electrician and HVAC and move fire heads and do a few things in the basement. But he felt like he could do it himself at a much reduced cost. However, he could not have it ready for September. So that's why we needed a temporary option, so he can take a number of months to do his regular duties and build.
Who knows, we should assume that if he can't start spending the money until July,
Right.
that it could take him all school year, depending on what else happens.
I don't think he anticipated 2 years, he said 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, John, it will be
Yeah.
done by October 1st.
And if I could call your attention to, there's a typo in the second paragraph where it says district funds include 14,648. That number is actually the number in the table.
Right.
15,148, right.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah, I'm sorry, just one, I don't get, did you, what was the cost, or the speculative cost for anything to do with the second floor of the building? Because you had looked.
We didn't.
Oh, you didn't?
No, when I first moved here, I was under the impression we don't have two ways of egress for students from up there. So if you were to try to use that space again, the current staircase needs to be rebuilt because it has to be wider and it can't run right into the window. You know, it runs to a window and then turns like that.
And
So
honestly, any conversations we have towards that are really going to be premature and kind of spinning wheel. That's why,
No,
that's why I'm going to say,
yeah.
I'm going to say we should
So I
have, the
didn't
school board
invest-
should task a committee to look at our facility and see what's their best option for a room.
Yeah, well, we facilities, can we do that?
Well, I think if we're considering adding space to the building, it should come from a director from the school board to say, okay, a committee, maybe it's a facility committee, that's fine. This is what you're tasked with. You're tasked with to identify a space sufficient for add a classroom to the building, so that preschool can be housed with the proper utilities in the room and a proper bathroom in the room, separate from the rest of the building for preschool, I think would be what we would task the building to look at. Maybe it doesn't need to be more complicated than that, and we should probably just get that rolling in the next 6 months. And I think the question for tonight is between now and January, I'm hearing the majority of us want to keep that 15,140 in there for now. And we all understand what that number means. We're talking about using that to build a room in the basement to house the library. So we'll keep it in there for now. So the Article 1 number for now is going to be the 126, be 31.
So we can't use it for the building?
Well, that's going to be something.
Sugar has the moisture won't problem.
Is a common question, okay, yeah.
Sure.
You all have a really difficult task of looking at educational investments and having to make hard decisions about which to advocate for. And I guess I'm sitting here listening to the previous conversation about this new staff position, hearing the discussion about preschool, the warrant article on the bus, the question about topping up the special education fund. And I wish that I felt really confident sitting here saying we have a community that will pay for all of that in the same year. I don't know that our community's tolerance for an increase in the school budget. You all do, and I think that's why we trust you to do this job. But every time, and I'm not usually the fiscal conservative, it's not my nature, but I believe we live in a community that I've heard sitting in this room is concerned about cost. And so every one of these will just keep $10,000 in for this and $15,000 in for that and $36,000 in for that. That's bumping up the cost of taxpayers a little bit and a little bit. And again, I don't know what that threshold is. And I just wanted to make a comment that I think all of us trust that you know what it is and where people are going to feel like, yes, this is an investment in education we can make versus we're going to start pulling things out of this and pushing back as a community because we don't feel comfortable with that. And you all have done a lot of work to put this together, and I would hate to see some of these advancements for our students fall by the wayside because people look at the total number and go, that's too much money, I'm not going to spend it, and they start picking up.
I guess that's partially why, and I understand the arguments for and the reasoning, but makes me a little jittery to even talk about a building addition. Because now it's out there, and everyone, that's gonna snowball, I'm afraid it's gonna snowball in the wrong direction. And it's like, oh, we're gonna do this, and then all of a sudden you're gonna be asking for money for a building.
And that's a great point to make, but I always throw that in the context of we're bringing in preschool, and the number one thing we get tossed is the 6th grade. And if we bring our 6th graders to Bartlett, we're talking about adding $100,000 to $150,000 minimum to our budget every single year in perpetuity, versus, okay, if we spend $150,000 in 1 year through a 10-year bond, it's a lot less than sending our 6th graders to Bartlett.
And really, I'm with you on that.
But that's what I'm saying, so that's like, yeah, it's scary to throw out things like that, but I like to consider everything as a whole in that regard. And what we're talking about, yeah, we might be talking about spending money in there, but the town's pretty savvy to what we do. And yeah, there'll be some rumors that'll fly around because we brought it up, but that's why it's, you task the committee with it, you go through a process where you're considering things in the real world. If a committee between now and July decides, hey, we're gonna build this room or we're not, if we don't spend that $15,000, it doesn't raise taxes. And that's something that we should explain to people. You know, if between now and July, we decide, hey, we're not gonna put the library in the basement because we're gonna do something else, then it never increases the tax rate.
So, is there any money in our current budget for John to start doing anything on the property this year, given that it's not just benefiting a potential preschool? It would benefit the school in general.
We always have a fund balance at the end of the year that we send back to the town. We have contingency funds for, boiler breaking down and things like that are often left. I couldn't guarantee it's going to be there now, but come at the end of the year.
It's, I mean, those are, to me,
It's
that's,
not something we can.
yeah, that's not really something we would consider for spending on something like that. That's why we plan, that's why we do this,
Right.
that's why we ask for the money up front, saying, if we want the money to do this, it's not, oh, we've got money for this, and we don't spend it, we'll do that. It's just,
Right.
we've never budgeted it that way, and it's a tough thing to do. If we did, we would have people coming to us and saying, hey, we're not going to support that. So I think for now, we're going to keep that 126 in the Article 1. Let's consider in January maybe tasking the building committee with taking a serious look at our facilities here. And
I'm not sure where you're getting the 126 from.
Jess,
I was just trying to figure out, so it's 114,283 plus the 12,548.
No, you can't count that. That's related to grants. So the warrant article itself is for $114,283.
Which was the original number that you asked me to stick with, that we.
That number would
Right.
be the warrant.
Oh, so we
the
don't.
map page is a clarification on how you achieve that without spending the specific money that is targeted for.
So,
Just for clarification purposes, so this is, that backside is not going to be added to go into the warrant to raise those revenues, but for transparency's sake, that back portion is part of the cost of starting.
Yes.
Okay.
So how we run. And I think that's important to show that
The
you've done
assumed
due
cost.
diligence.
Right.
because you can't expend revenue from grants until you get those. So
And that's why I was asking, how certain are we that we're going to get those? Because,
there's a good certainty.
okay.
And we've talked about that as far as.
Can we do those two warrant articles? No.
No.
Start up cost and then the actual.
Because you can't have one without the other.
I know, but if you put it
Six
in the right order, and we'll get it down.
Well, see, if this gets voted into position, the startup costs go away because you've spent them, those are 1-year expenditures, and then the other part goes into our yearly operating budget, and our yearly operating budget will go up by almost $100,000.
I'm just really worried about
here.
a 6-digit number there and.
Well, this is what we had to begin with. So, Gail went back and right.
Right.
And if you come to a budget meeting, you just know
Where will the kids be and how is this going to work with all that potential space is being renovated?
the pavilion.
Kids have 6 grade center.
The kids will be in the 4 homerooms as they always have been.
Yes.
And the preschool youngsters will be in the library.
And the books will be
in one of those 3 spaces, office spaces, classrooms, wherever will be dispersed throughout the building. Library will happen in their classrooms instead of students going to a library class.
Feels like that's scheduled for your minutes.
What?
For here, there's some people milling about outside there.
You're not.
No, they were, the women's writers were in the other.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay.
No, that's fine. Go ahead, Mr. Urbano.
Oh, no, I just want to make sure we're supposed to be.
Except for that one, which made me think so.
They were just next door.
So for now, that number's going to be the 114, 283. And Keith, that's why we go through this. I mean, if we get 250 people onto our budget here, and say people are crazy, take it out of there, and we consider taking it out.
Yes.
That's why we do it. You have to put it out there to get to know how people are going to respond.
The other thing this doesn't take into account is any potential revenue that you would have,
Tuition, right,
because you can't count on that.
right.
Do you remember the number of it? Do you know how much that costs yet? We figured that out.
The tuition?
Yeah.
We left that up to the board to decide, but if you recall, well, because the board sets tuition, that's your job, really. But we did give you the listing of all of what the other preschools in the area, I think we made a recommendation. We don't.
It's in one of the
8 or something like that.
I think it was less than that.
Article 2 is the
That would be all.
607,359.
And these are just placeholders tonight, and then in January, you'll adopt the budget and move on.
Article 3 is the school also going to decide in January how much we're going to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, if you really want to think about it again, you want to schedule to buy a bus until next year. Bus costs about $90,000, as Keith said. Typically, you withdraw about 45.
So, I mean, in my mind, that would leave enough that over the next 3 years, we would build back up again. So if my gut is saying we don't need to put any more.
Just like last year, we didn't put any more into it for the same reason. We cut it down. last year.
15 a year is what we have to try to.
Last year, we lowered it. This year, we didn't have one. I mean, it's a trust fund for the liquidity center. That's like basically a placeholder for the revenue from the.
About $3 million each year.
And, so the only thing that, so the only thing, if anybody wants to recommend that we're going to add to the special education fund, that we need to add another article to raise the money for that. I'm okay with it.
Yeah, we talked about it at the committee meeting, and feeling was a good way, you know, we were, so, do you guys have another opinion?
I mean, it's.
No, the only time that, and again, I was just looking at your unexpended fund balance last year, you're about $100,000. Where if you were in a gym, you had $100,000, I mean, typically run $50,000 to $75,000. We budget for any known pieces. So the only time you'd really run into a gym is if somebody moved in September and had some significant needs. And if that were the case, then in the spring, you might have to have a supplemental article or debt center.
And I know that typically administrators, that's why they recommend that they have these, but the reason that really is to protect us from the politics of it. And I think the town of Jackson is pretty reasonable in that regard from a political standpoint. I don't think it's anything wrong with it. If we ever need to get the town for a budget deficit article or a special thing like that, it's not a big deal, I don't think.
Well, because it works against what we're having in preschool, just the preschool inevitably is going to lower.
I think the taxpayers in Jackson prefer us to be as tight as we can to cover us in a reasonable way, but at the same time, because we do that, we have to spend a lot of money, so again, I think that's a reality that we're able to go with. So we're keeping it the same. So
not adding.
Could you again remind us of the capacity of the preschool in the new proposed space? And then either tonight or just at some point, and then an estimate of how many kids are affected locally, and then how many spaces that would be for tuition, just to get a sense of what revenue might
So
look like.
I think that the two open-ended business side of the school board really needs to figure out, what I don't think we've done yet, is you know, in the states we're talking about here, I'm assuming we're really not looking to tuition kids into this necessarily. Or we should decide what that number is, and then we should also need to decide how much we're going to charge for tuition. We should probably get that together.
I thought there was a max number in the proposal.
There wasn't a proposal, but at some point, we can either, as a board, just accept what the proposal was and never have that discussion, or we could have a recommendation from the preschool committee, say, this is what we're going to recommend specifically
And then decide.
for tuition, this is what we're going to.
Well, the tuition in discussion would go on despite the limit, because we might not hit the limit 1 year.
We should know the answer.
Like, so the tuition discussion, I think, needs to happen regardless.
I guess, you know, you have a limit for number of students you want for next year as well.
In that room, I think 8 or 10 would be max.
Okay, so we need to consider a number of 8 or 10. And we haven't formally decided that yet. I don't know if we want to do that tonight or we want to do that in January.
Is there someone we could go to that, I mean, I think in the special, I mean, in the.
Yeah, why don't you consider the number, the
Tell us
limits under
square
there,
footage.
and come back to us in January. and see what we're going to
Or something
recommend.
like that.
And then my recommendation would be that, you know, whatever, there's a number that she'll recommend, and we'll go with that, and then I think we need to come up with a tuition, and if we know we're not at that number, we will say, okay, we can tuition in 3 kids this year, or 1 kid, or none.
Well, I think that is determined on the number of kids that enrolls. That we can't determine. We can determine that what is the cap, and then what is the tuition amount. And that's what we have to decide as a board too. Because the number of-
And maybe we only go to 80% of whatever the max is, because what if you get somebody with 3 kids who live that way?
In other words, the proposal had an idea, had a number in place for what it was.
We had estimated, our proposed tuition rate is $6,000.
But at some point, the board needs to formalize that.
Right.
I think, and we should formalize that before the town posts us what we're going to do.
And also, I think we should consider staff children as well in that. Because we have staff members with preschool age students.
And I think that would have to fall under the same policy that we'd have for the rest of
Right.
the school, I would think.
Yeah.
In other words, if the space is available, then it's a reduced tuition rate. But so we have to figure out a tuition rate for both probably.
Yeah, I mean, when we proposed that in 2016, we proposed 6,000, and that was about 1,000 more than Location Mountain or Warwick, those comps, and it was about 2,000 less than Warwick. So we have to, I mean, if we care about comps, we have to update those, but it put us at the higher end for the area, for the time.
So, Jess, you want to work with Gail between now and January
Sure.
and come up with a number to recommend to the board, or we'll just formally?
That should be no problem.
Can we get somebody who knows what they're doing to recommend a head count for that space?
Yeah, I'm sure the preschool.
You know what I mean? I
committee-
mean,
Oh, it's
you-
regulated by
Yeah.
square footage.
Right, so it's gotta be someone, right? Okay, I'm not just gonna sit here and say 7.
Well, there's a square footage and there's also ideal, so I think, but between you and
Oh,
Gail.
yeah, no, I mean, we made those, we can get that for you, no problem.
Yeah.
There's very definitive guidelines about best
Yeah.
practices, so you can do that.
But we need to formalize those two things, I think.
Yeah, we can do that.
As a reporting proposal.
So
So
we'll get
kids
to,
are-
a proposed tuition and both a head count
Recommended.
and the capacity, and then a recommended.
Capacity, number of Jackson students, and then the delta.
Yeah, I guess what is the maximum capacity?
Right.
That the square footage dictates, and then what is what the recommended.
Yeah, and both would be helpful, because if we tuition people in and we run the max, and then 2 more people move into town, and we,
Right,
square footage wise, we could do it, but we would just have to talk about our policy.
sure. And we need it low, as well. Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Moving along, where are we at now?
And just if there are any other articles for the warrant, I don't.
New maintenance trust fund, we didn't talk about tuition trust fund. Oh, okay.
The only reason why you want to consider the maintenance trust fund is the siding for this building, and I think we have other avenues to do with that, so.
Yeah, we asked about that, and they basically said it's in good shape, and we're helping hold up.
Thank you. Thank you for that awesome week in hard work.
So
Thanks.
it's kind of like you guys over everything, no more, and
This is it.
That's what we were going to do.
Yeah.
yeah, so the winter maintenance was just for that.
Yeah.
You got school buses on there, did you guys?
I think it was
Say
not,
10,000, right?
Oh, I don't know, no.
I think it was.
Right, school bus? That would work.
Or did we say no?
I think no.
So we had no.
So I'm going to strike that.
Jim spoke to the bus driver, and is it Valadares, the mechanic, who was
Yeah.
saying we on the bus one more year, we were in good shape.
Yeah.
So, like, the feeling was we didn't need to push that.
But that wasn't being extended, the cycle is one more year.
That's correct.
Yeah, we had one.
So the mechanic was just confirming that we had one, wasn't saying, we go a fourth year.
No, it's just
But you not have an exceptional class.
Although, it is something we should talk about another day.
Yes.
Yeah, it is, because I think cars used to last 5 years, and they're about 10 plus. Does that mean it is with buses too? So we should
Can we get a
look at
solar panel on it?
that. They have electric trucks out there for competitions, and it's going to be possible. Moving along to superintendent, administrative reports.
Yeah, just, I'm going to give you a handout for the general public as well. There's a bill in legislature right now. It's called SB 193. We know Jess here, you're very familiar with it. But as school board members, you should become aware that, you know, on the back side of the page, there are a couple different resources. But what SB 193 is, it's called the Education Freedom Savings Account, passed through the House, and now it's going to the Senate. And this is often called the voucher bill. And what it does is it says it's approximately $3,600 per student to apply. Basically, the district has an account with every student's name in it. And if a student, you'll see, to be eligible, they're 5 to 20 years old, and haven't graduated from high school yet, they have to be attending a public school currently for a year, and then they can access this account and use it toward tuition throughout, New Hampshire, Vermont, at an institution. Now, they also have to come in earning less than 300% of the federal poverty line. And you'll see some of these guidelines. This is morphing, it's changing. But please know that these discussions and this bill is moving forward. You can use it for a lot of different things. So if you choose to, you can go to online schools, you can use it for, you know, some transportation. Right now, other materials related to it. And it's just, like I said, it's out there. In some places, they expect, you know, some revenue loss for the schools. And then other places, they, depending upon who you talk to, they don't expect it to impact districts wholeheartedly. So there are really a couple different resources out there. One is called Region Hiring, and they are a wealth of information. And I do have a hard copy here. I didn't print it for everybody, but it talks about the policy analysis. And the other is the Joe Clive Hartford policy review, and you can feel free to go online and take a look at those. So just know that this is the voucher bill, and again, the finance department at the state is still trying to calculate out and figure out how much this would mean. Their projections say maybe Conway cost them $70,000 in support for these, and other places, Manchester might be a little bit higher. But again, your level of awareness, I don't want to go into too much because it's not definitive yet, and it can be pretty bulky if you get down to the nitty gritty, but I can try and answer some questions for you.
I just have two
Sure.
popping in my mind, and they could be on here, I just haven't read it all. So you said Vermont, New Hampshire, so it would not count for somebody to go to Maine?
No, it could.
Oh, okay.
It could. Yeah, right now, I don't think there are boundaries on these
Oh, okay.
restrictions at all.
All right.
New York, I don't know right now, I don't think that they have it restricted.
And then the other question I have is, it says, just to ask the question, they could, another Conway could send a student here?
They sure could.
Okay, so it says
So
private.
that would be something, you know, that we were talking about here. Your tuition rate is, what, $10,000 for somebody outside. Could somebody conceivably take the $3,700 voucher from Conway and pay Jackson with that? Now they owe $6,300 and say, oh, price of X school, private school costs this much. I mean, these are the moving pieces
Right, so it's more
that.
affordable. So they can come to another if you're tuitioning it.
Absolutely.
Okay, because I thought it just said private, but.
No.
It doesn't.
They
That
could-
would be used, you could use it
Apply for
for
private and religious school tuition.
And you can already tuition.
Right.
This was part, there's the whole debate about where can you tuition people.
Right,
to.
okay, I'm just,
Yeah.
thank you.
There's one item here that just looks a little vague, and maybe, so it's the second section of requirements, and it says, or be assigned to a school that for 2 consecutive years has been unable to demonstrate it provides opportunity for an adequate education. And then it says under, who, I mean, when is that, is that in there, that, what they're defining as an adequate?
Well, they did define it. So for example, when No Child Left Behind came back, there were schools in need of improvement. So if their test scores were significantly low, you know, you could apply to go someplace else. Right now, because they changed the state assessment piece, I think there are quality indicators that they could use.
And just because they also have, or attend a poor performing school, which falls into what
But so
you were saying.
really, that kind of question is really premature, because what this bill is going to end up in the final form, or gets to the final form, is going to be probably, so a lot of the and/or statements aren't logical yet.
Right.
They'll have to be in its final form, and they're not yet, so it's kind of hard to say.
Right, I mean, I guess I'm just looking at some of these, and yes, I know they're not logical, and therefore my initial reaction of just, glancing on it a little bit I know about it over the last, month or two, is that I don't see this impacting us negatively that much, if at all.
That's where I think people might be tuitioning kids to Jackson.
But I think the main question becomes, where does that
Position is not that concerned.
I'm curious to see how it flushes out. Before we even wrap our head.
And I think, the only thing I would say is before we take a position as a board, there are more resources to look at. I just pulled it up, just this topic alone, there have been 94
Absolutely.
updates and emails. It's so hotly contested, so
Yeah.
controversial, and still so vague that we will be, in January, it will be fleshed out a lot more. And I really think Dan Balloon is great. I love Reaching Higher New Hampshire. I think they are a generally neutral party to give information, but there is a public school bent, New Hampshire School Board Association official position. So just be cautious.
That's why if you go to the other one,
Yeah.
that's why we try to put the Josiah Barker policy review. That gives you, that's why I didn't print out any one particular piece, but if you go to both, you'll see the comparison contrast.
Thank you.
Thank you. Interesting.
Thanks, Kevin.
Other than that, the SAU passed the budget the other night. It is budget season, so that's all I have.
All right, at the end of trimester 1, we sent home our report cards, but we have a new way of assessing student behaviors and learning behaviors, so I want to share the rubric with you that the teachers used. We've broken down all of the learning behaviors, the behaviors that support learning into those 4 areas that were recommended by the State Department of Education. Communication, creativity, collaboration, and self-direction. And you can read for yourself. The teachers used the rubric to assign students 1, 2, 3, 4. As you may recall, we had some concerns from families last year about students not being able to achieve a 4, for instance, follows directions. So 3 was consistently all of the time. So how would you possibly do more than consistently all of the time? Okay. So we as an administrative team really looked at a variety of templates and report cards and kind of decided that since we're all moving forward with competency-based education and these are the recommended work study practices from the State Department, that we would adopt those as well. And just one other kind of thing that, one of the jobs that Vicki does is she keeps me informed, sends me report cards and progress reports. We have 28 students at the high school, 22 of those students are on the honor first semester. So I'm really proud of all of that. And
Just so you know, that one of the honor roll students did not know that it was going to be posted in the paper. Otherwise, they would have achieved high honors.
well, here we go.
Not going to name names, but
I also
they're both studying next.
I have sent some emails to the kids and the families, you know, a few of them, and they were shocked that I,
Oh, yes, we had that.
yeah.
That was very nice. to get.
Yeah, that's really nice that they have that connection back. I like that, thank you.
Brings us back to citizen comments. Okay.
I agree with the woman, I don't know her name. Sasha, who spoke, in that I would encourage the school board to sharpen their pencils and do whatever we can to continue to help the school perform admirably and exceptionally, but get that budget down. People are being squeezed really hard, and I mean, Jackson's a tough town, there's a lot of wealthy retirees, but there's a lot of us who are working 2 and 3 jobs and have no benefits, never mind full boat benefits, and it's really, really tough, and people are getting squeezed, and I think we're going to actually start to see some people leaving now because of it. So yeah, I would encourage you, there is a perception out there that, you know, everything that comes through the school board gets rubber stamped and everything's yes, and I want to tell Sasha that, you know, ultimately it does get down to the voters to decide, but it's, you know, not many people show up at the budget meeting. I encourage people, but ultimately it is the voters who make that decision to approve the budget or make a proposal for a new one. But I would encourage you to do everything you can to continue to support the school, but at the same time sharpen the pencils.
And thank you guys, it's a lot of us similar faces for coming to these meetings and the annual meeting, because those usually aren't attended like they should be. And so get the word out for that too, because it stimulates conversation and helps us also to really hear comments like yours.
In particular, since the preschool itself is something that, you know, we didn't want to put on the warrant last year because we were afraid that we weren't going to get the attendance at a regular district meeting that we should, to validate it. And it would be really nice to get as many people to the annual district meeting as we can to get a good solid vote on that article up or down. It's just, you know, it's just important that we get a portion of our population here to make that decision for us. So it's not just 15, 20 people making the decision for the whole town. Any others? Board member issued committee reports? Anything?
I just back with my Whitney hat on. So Whitney key cards. Now that that system is for the most part up and running and working, who are you in charge of who gets a key card?
If you're not someone who's coming and going on a regular basis, for instance, Dottie, the door is open or closed without using a key card. So I think that was a misunderstanding from our last meeting.
Right.
A key holder doesn't have to have a key anymore. John sets the schedule for women writers per se to open at this time and close at that time. So as long as you're coming to your event during the time that it's scheduled to be opened and shut, you don't need an actual key card.
For instance, like the door is going to lock probably in about 5 minutes.
I think it's already
So
locked.
what does it do with like the alarm? You turn it, just turns that off?
Right,
So,
yes.
so someone died, you know, the regularly scheduled events that happen weekly, monthly, whatever it is, those are programmed in, it opens up, I assume a little ahead of time for the person to come in and set up, do what they have to do, and then some lead time for leaving as well.
So someone like Dottie doesn't need to have an actual
Right.
card in her hand anymore. We used to have keys for the key holders.
Right.
So the key holder word is a little misleading. They don't actually have to have a key. What they need to be is trained in how to John's phone number, how to shut the gas off, how to, where the fuse box is, those kinds of things.
So,
Very helpful.
so then but the scheduling, well, we have Gloria, but you, the scheduling is still going through you, so you would go to John and say, we have this group that's coming in every Thursday morning, they need to have access.
Yeah,
at
that's
these
part of
times.
his job responsibilities. We have a weekly check on who's coming, who's going, and he ensures that they have the technology they might need to run the place, to get it open, to make sure they're coming and what tables they need, because he, again, prefers to set up his own tables and break down the room.
But then after that, he is the go-to person, if they have his phone number, he's the go-to person if there are issues, so they're not bothering you.
This is schedule mishap and something happens, John doesn't know if he's going to be able to.
You can call John, and he can open the building remotely.
Okay,
Right.
great.
Thank
Thank you.
Anything else? Next meeting, January 16th,
2018, we have a little.
6 p.m. You decided that manifest is nothing for non-public? So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.